Hello, I'm Libby Hepburn, a founding member of ACSA and working in citizen science for 20 years. You may know me from a number of working groups in Australia, but today I'm speaking as co-chair of the recently formed Global Community of Practice on Citizen Science and Open Science. I've been invited to talk to you about how we establish this community of practice and how we work with co-creation to deliver meaningful results together. You're interested in how to enrich connections and partnerships in your work and how to manage a successful community of practice. So we will be hearing both from UNESCO and We Observe about the importance of principles and values as the basis for the way we structure our work. Fundamental to citizen science is its ambition to benefit both science and society. And the process of the community of practice is a direct response to the need to work in new ways if we are to make any difference to the wicked problems the world faces today. Key principles and values are shared across the citizen science and open science community, and now over the last decade they're also being recognized as crucial by the big global agencies for change, for instance the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs. This is a reason why these agencies are now seeing citizen science and open science as potentially important partners in achieving change in both policy and action. Today we'll look at this community of practice as an example. UNESCO people have been involved in a number of our working groups and communities of practice, and in July they reached out to several of us to invite us to contribute to a global perspective on the relationship between citizen science and open science to help in developing their recommendation in 2021. Here is Anna Persic, who's working with us from UNESCO, talking at the recent ACSA conference as part of our community of practice.
And my name is Anna Persic. I work here at UNESCO in Paris. I'm the chief of section for science policy and partnerships in the division of science policy and capacity building. And because we see open science as something that is very much going across the different borders, including with regards to disciplinary or sectoral borders of science. So just to give you maybe just a little bit of a kind of background into why UNESCO got into open science is that, of course, we've been seeing across the world this movement that calls for opening science and scientific knowledge and the scientific process and practice more, not only among scientists, that there is need for opening science for the sake of scientists, but also for the society, and to have scientists work more closely with citizens, with other knowledge holders, to be able to advance in the scientific process and also be more relevant for society in certain instances. So we do understand that the question is no longer if open science is happening, it is how it's going to happen and how do we make sure that it can contribute and benefit to everybody, and that there is no risk of actually this transition to open science basically causing even more discrepancies between the South and the North in terms of science, technology, and innovation. So as I said, for us, we see open science as a tool that allows, or as a movement, let's say, that allows scientific information, data, and outputs to be more accessible and more reliably harnessed with the active engagement of all the stakeholders. So as we said, it's science for scientists, but it's also science for and with society. And from the UNESCO perspective, one of the critical reasons why we got into the work on open science is that from different parts of the world, particularly from the South, Open science can really be a true game changer in bridging the science, technology, and innovation gap between and within countries, and also fulfilling the human right to science. So this is kind of maybe where UNESCO is really coming into play to ensure that open science really does bridge the gap between science, technology, innovation between countries, and that it fulfills the human right to science. And we also see it, in the UN context and in the global context. You are certainly aware of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and we do see open science as a very important accelerator towards the achievement of the SDGs. One of the things that our member states were really clear on is that they want this process of developing the recommendation to be as inclusive, transparent, and consultative as possible. And from the beginning of our discussions on open science, there was a clear understanding that there's a lot of actors involved, and that we have to involve all these actors into our conversations. The recommendation is expected to define shared values and principles for open science, point to some concrete actions for open science, and also these actions are mainly addressed to the governments, but they're also addressed to these different actors of open science. It's a 2-year consultation process, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how it's going. It is guided by a multi-stakeholder Open Science Advisory Committee, but it has this overarching open science partnership. And we are happy to have Citizen Science Partnership also as part of our partnership. And we really are hoping that, it's not just because we need to develop the recommendation that we want to put the different actors together. It's also because once the recommendation is adopted, somebody has to put it in place, somebody has to implement it. So as Libby was saying about the community of practice for citizen science and open science, it's open science globally as well. And again, we are very happy to be with you today, and that you are with us in this process. And as I said, not only while we develop the recommendation, but we really will count on this community of practice that you are building in terms of implementing the recommendation when it hopefully is adopted by our member states.
For the citizen science community, this invitation from UNESCO is an important opportunity, as it's the first time we've been invited to be collaborators in defining a big global policy instrument. So how did we respond? Rather than suggesting a single representative, and because we had the experience of working within the We Observe approach in other COPs, it was easy to decide that this was a great model for the challenge we'd been given. Here is Uta Wen, who is not only one of the co-chairs of the Citizen Science and Open Science COP, but also a chair and one of the leaders of the We Observe initiative, to give us some background on its processes and progress to date. Thank you, Uta.
Hello, my name is Uta Wen from IHE Delft in the Netherlands, and it's my pleasure to share with you today the We Observe approach to communities of practice in the field of citizen science. I would like to share with you a little bit of background of how the We Observe project came about and why it was funded, how we've set up and co-designed communities of practice, and what we've learned in the process so far. The We Observe project came about by a realization of the European Commission that its funding so far for citizen science projects, but also citizen observatories, really needed to be accompanied by greater collaboration amongst such projects. So the projects you see on the screen, the SEND, GROW, Ground Truth 2.0 and LensSense projects are what we call sister projects funded under the same call. And the We Observe project came in order to address challenges that the larger field still suffered from a lack of collaboration across these projects. And we see this in the broader citizen science field, where there's a lack of awareness what citizen science can really deliver in terms of data interactions and change in behavior, in terms of acceptability of particularly the data that citizen science can deliver, but also in terms of the sustainability of such projects, typically funded on a project basis, and once the funding runs out, often these initiatives end. And so the realization was that really greater collaboration across projects needed to happen to strengthen the overall ecosystem of citizen science and citizen observatory projects. Citizen observatory is a term we use a lot in Europe when we refer to a particular form of citizen science that tries to establish very close links, especially with the policy making and the uptake of citizen science results. Communities of practice were therefore one way to say we need to overcome dispersion of knowledge on citizen science practice. We need to get projects and their practitioners to work better together. And communities practice, of course, are a more generic tool of knowledge management that brings together people who share a passion or a concern about a topic, and they want jointly to learn how to address this better by regularly interacting face-to-face or online. So in We Observe, we have set up 4 communities of practice in order to address the generic challenges that we're trying to tackle within the field of citizen science, namely lack of awareness, acceptability, and sustainability. And you can see that the 4 different COPs cut across these thematic areas in different ways. So what we have seen and learned from this process of setting up and running the communities of practice is that for one thing, co-design doesn't stop with agreeing objectives and arriving at an inception report. It's really a way of working throughout, accommodating people and their ideas throughout the entire process. And this comes down to creating an atmosphere where everybody feels comfortable with their contribution and also the time that they can allocate for this, which of course differs very much from one person to another, given the various obligations that they have. People are also able to share what they do in their projects, what they've learned. We've created an atmosphere of trust where people can share not only successes but also failures, and everybody can learn from them. And particularly the Interrupt COP is also very good at actually experimenting with citizen science data. And on a continuous basis, we aim for inclusiveness and equity in the ways in which we're working and making sure that we leave no one behind. We have produced joint outputs. For one thing, we've created a joint glossary as a sort of agreement of terminology. We found in the early ways of working there was a lot of misunderstandings and clarifications necessary. So we've codified our meanings of different terms: stakeholder, co-design, engagement, etc. This is available online on the We Observe website. And we're also co-authoring papers and reports, and you can see some of the examples below. So in conclusion, I'm happy to share with you that the We Observe communities of practice by now actually quite well established in the scientific community. To some extent, we've become a reference point for thematic discussions. We see also that there's added value for our members of the community of our practice to participate, not only in terms of knowledge consolidation, putting experiences on paper, but also the networking across the citizen science community and better linking people and projects and their activities. And finally, we're happy to see that we have also created a spin-off initiative, sister initiative, the new Citizen Science and Open Science Community of Practice under the Citizen Science Global Partnership, which is based on the way in which we have set up the We Observe communities of practice.
So thanks to Uta for this short summary of the background and progress of the We Observe initiative funded by the EU. Although it's only 2 years in existence, this initiative has achieved significant results and gained real respect and stature in the policy landscape of the European Union and globally. So, of course, our experience of establishing the Citizen Science and Open Science COP was nothing like the model, as always. It was a bit like harnessing an express train, as UNESCO gave us the invitation to be part of their process, and then asked us to prepare a short background paper all within 3 weeks. Fortunately, when we put the call out, the global interest and response was so good that we were able to produce a creditable document that they say is very useful to them. As you can see, the views of 63 citizen science practitioners from 24 countries were synthesized to create this background paper. And we talked about all the issues and elements that UNESCO were interested in looking at. That call for interest has given us an amazing global network of passionate practitioners and already many insightful perspectives, ideas and references. Since July, we've got on track and had our first COP workshop, which was taken over 2 days because of different time zones. And the information and ideas from that were the basis for our Inception report, which will be the framework for our future work. Stephanie would like me to mention Miro, which is a remote working platform which we used for the first time. It's fantastic because using a virtual whiteboard, even with big groups of, say, 80 contributors, everyone can add their ideas and work together, so everyone's engaged. Also, the comments can be downloaded as a spreadsheet. It's a great tool. Because one of the basic requirements in nurturing a productive and enjoyable community of practice is the opportunity for everyone to both contribute and interact. And Miro certainly helps with that. The COP also contributed a session to the recent ACSA conference, and some of the diverse contributions from our members have really reinforced our understanding that the power inherent in community of practice work comes from encouraging knowledge and sharing from all sources and being open to the amazing experiences of our fellow citizen science practitioners worldwide. By creating a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, we all learn so much. Some members of the COP have an academic focus. Others are interested in things like licensing and data accessibility. Personally, it's on-the-ground action work that fascinates me, and I want to share just a couple of examples from our ACSA presentation that I would never have known about without the COP work. This is from Mariana Varese, who's been working for over 20 years with over 100 groups of citizen science researchers in the Amazon basin, researching fish migrations and water quality, and referencing sophisticated and advanced thinking on situated openness to help advance her work. Dealing with some of the most intractable issues like power imbalances inherent in funded research and privacy issues and around some sorts of important data. Shannon Dosamenga, sharing the principles that guide the work of the global open science hardware movement, which again resonate with all of us working in citizen science. Just look at these principles that they're working with. And these are evidenced all the time in the actions and the work that they do. By just sharing these practical examples and realizing that this work is actually going on and being successful across the world, and learning and thinking more about the different challenges being experienced by colleagues, is what these communities of practice are all about. So this is how we make connections, partnerships, and co-creation work at local and global levels. It's all about sharing a passion or concern and learning how to improve things through regular interactions. And these are an advanced and sophisticated and networked approach based on shared values. And the methodologies, management, and actions flow from these principles. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening. And we'd like to invite anyone who's interested to join our community of practice. You'll find details on the Citizen Science Global Partnership website and lots of other background information. And you can talk to me. And Uta would also like to invite everyone to look and become involved with their communities of practice, which are not just European-based. And she's offering, as we all are, to help with anyone in Australia who would be interested in exploring how to develop good community